World of Warfare presents
The Battle of Coral Sea. By early May of 1942, the Japanese Empire was in the triumphant phase of its expansionist campaigns in the Pacific, now in control of most of the western Pacific basin. They had crushed the British in Hong Kong, Malaya, Borneo, and Singapore by February, along with the vital supply port of Rabaul at the tip of New Britain. The following month, the Dutch would lose their vital oil fields on Sumatra and Java, while in April, Bataan had fallen to the Japanese, resulting in the largest surrender in American history, when 75,000 Filipino and American troops fell into Japanese captivity, leading to the Bataan Death March, which took the lives of an estimated 17,000 Allied soldiers. In May, the besieged island of Corregidor had fallen, while British resistance in Burma ended in a humiliating retreat back to the Indian frontier. All in all, the Allies, it seems, were losing the War of the Pacific, with both India and Australia under imminent threat of invasion. Anxiety was high among American war leaders, who saw Australia as their last line of strategic offense in their plans to retake the Indies. And when Australian Prime Minister John Curtin turned to America for help, knowing full well that Australia's mother country was stretched too thin to offer assistance, President Franklin D. Roosevelt made the defense of vital supply lines in Australia a top defensive priority. As for the Japanese, senior military leaders considered an outright invasion of Australia an impractical overreach, so in an effort to firm up their defensive perimeter, they set their sight on the town of Port Moresby on the southwestern coast of New Guinea, where its expansive airfield would allow them easy access into the Coral Sea in northern Australia, while depriving Allied bombers from attacking their defensive positions at Rabaul and Truk Island in the Carolines. Japan's objective of an amphibious invasion of Port Moresby led to an asset tug-of-war between Admiral Inoue Shigeyoshi's Fourth Fleet in the South Pacific and his superior, Admiral Yamamoto Isoroku's Combined Fleet, who wanted to employ Japan's fleet carriers in the Central Pacific in defense of Midway, leading to an April compromise that sent the newly formed Carrier Division 5 to the South Pacific under the command of Admiral Takagi Takio, including the carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku for the planned invasion of Port Moresby. What the Japanese didn't know was that American codebreakers had broken Japan's primary operational cipher, JN-25B, giving the Allies a 3-week advance notice of Japan's intentions for Port Moresby, which in turn redirected the American aircraft carriers Lexington and Yorktown into the Coral Sea for an anticipated showdown with Japan's invasion fleet. What the Americans didn't know, however, was that the Shikaku and Suikaku were undertaking a wide loop to the east around the Solomon Islands before steaming into the middle of the Coral Sea, leaving two opposing carrier forces in close proximity to one another without either party knowing that a deadly face-off was about to take place. The result would be the first carrier battle in world naval history. During the interwar years, as military air power came of age, war theorists in both Japan and America developed doctrines for the employment of a brand new weapon system, the aircraft carrier, which had never been used in open ocean combat against an opposing enemy force. With carrier experience still in its infancy for both combating nations, both faced the same handicaps and lack of experience. Aerial spotting remained a tricky matter, while over-ocean navigation and communication techniques remained primitive. The impact of weather conditions was another heavy-handed element of carrier warfare, which could heavily impact either side's ability to launch warplanes from bucking flight decks. Under such blind conditions for both sides, on May the 3rd, the Japanese captured the island of Tulagi in the Solomons, while senior American commander Vice Admiral Frank J. Fletcher moved north at the helm of Yorktown before launching an attack on Japanese invasion forces at Tulagi the morning of May the 4th, with Takagi's carriers still too far north at the time to intervene against Fletcher's less than effective attack on Japanese positions. Retiring south from his Tulagi raid to refuel and meet up with the Lexington, Takagi rounded the tip of the Solomons into the Coral Sea with full knowledge that the American carriers were somewhere in the area, while Fletcher wrongly assumed that the Japanese 5th Carrier Division would be passing south from Rabaul, placing the enemy somewhere off to his northwest. But when the 2 Japanese carriers were spotted near Bougainville on May the 6th, Fletcher altered his heading to west-northwest for an anticipated strike the following day. Yet during the night, unbeknownst to either commander, the opposing carrier groups came within 70 nautical miles of each other. Shortly after first light on the 7th, Fletcher received sightings of 2 carriers and 4 heavy cruisers off to his northwest, steaming toward the Jomard Passage through the Louisiades, prompting him to launch 50 fighter aircraft from the Lexington at 0930, followed by 43 aircraft from the Yorktown, at the same time dispatching a surface action group under the command of Australian Rear Admiral John Crace, with orders to physically block the passage. Even before Fletcher's reconnaissance had come in, at 0722, Takagi received reports of an enemy cruiser, 3 destroyers and 1 carrier to his southwest, turning the Shukaku and the Suikaku into the wind at 0815 before launching 78 aircraft. Proving the unreliability of both commanders' reconnaissance, when the American aircraft neared Dubois Island, instead of 2 heavy carriers, they came across the brand new light carrier Shoho, where they pelted the ship with 7 torpedo strikes and 13 bomb hits, setting the ship ablaze from stem to stern. Within 25 minutes after the Americans began their attack, the Shoho slipped beneath the surface, killing 631 crew members while leaving a scant 139 survivors bobbing in the Solomon Sea. After a string of military defeats since Japan's unprovoked attack at Pearl Harbor, the sinking of the Shoho proved to be a welcome morale boost after an aviator radioed Scratch 1 flat top back to Fletcher on the Yorktown. At the same time, after slower troop transport ships saw the dense column of smoke marking Shoho's pending demise, they fled to the north to stay well away from the enemy's carrier group. As for Takagi's failed reconnaissance, when his fighters arrived at the coordinates where his reconnaissance flyers had reported the enemy carrier group, they found the fast fleet oiler Neosho and her destroyer escort, the Sims. Spending the next 2 hours searching for the Americans' carrier group, as they grew ever more light on fuel, they returned to sink the Sims with a heavy loss of life, while the Neosho was hit by 7 bombs and a crashing Japanese Zero. Buoyed by her load of fuel oil, the American sailors on board the Neosho managed to keep her afloat for 4 more days. The day's combat also saw ground-based Japanese bombers out of Rabaul attack Grace's surface forces to little effect, while Takagi's desperate attempt to find the American carriers compelled him to launch another wave of fighters shortly before nightfall, which cost him 8 fighters when they attempted to land in the dark. By nightfall, the 2 enemy carrier groups were now close enough that the Americans could pick up on high-frequency homing beacons for the enemy's returning warplanes, while their over-the-horizon radar was able to pick up flight deck landing operations just beyond the horizon, leaving both combatants with a sense of looming dread for the day to come. In the morning, Fletcher launched reconnaissance aircraft in every direction just to hedge his bets, while the Japanese sent flights out to the south and southwest, spotting the Americans at 0800 hours, while the Americans spotted the Japanese at 0820 hours, launching 75 aircraft less than 40 minutes later, while the Japanese put up 69 planes a half hour after that. At 1100 hours, American fighters attacked both Japanese carriers, and while the Zuikaku managed to escape under a rain squall, the Shokaku took 3 1,000-pound bombs, which decimated the fore and aft quarters of her flight deck. On fire and unable to recover aircraft, with some 223 dead or seriously wounded men, the Shokaku was ordered to stand down as fast as she could sail. Recovering planes for the now crippled Shokaku, the Zuikaku recovered just 46 of the original 69 aircraft sent aloft from both flight decks, with a dozen recovered aircraft so badly damaged that they were pushed over the side. At 11:13, the Yorktown took a bomb hit, while a second near miss ruptured many of her seams, leaving a trail of glistening oil in her wake. The much larger and less maneuverable Lexington took the worst of the Japanese attack, with 2 bomb hits and 2 torpedo strikes, yet she still managed to maintain 24 knots of forward headway. For those Japanese aviators who had managed to make it back to the Zuikaku, their reports of sinking the Lexington convinced Takagi that he had won the battle, prematurely turning north and disengaging, while the Americans broke off to the south. At 12:47, the Lexington suffered a massive explosion below decks due to ruptured fuel tanks. Unable to put out the fire, at 14:42, a second explosion tore through the ship, while a third followed at 15:12. At 17:07, after fire raged unchecked throughout her hangar deck, the call went out to abandon ship before she was scuttled by torpedoes fired by her accompanying destroyers. The Yorktown, while not in danger of sinking, was so badly damaged that she set sail for Pearl Harbor, ending the Battle of Coral Sea. For the Japanese, while their objective of taking Port Moresby was officially off the table, the loss of the Shoho was seen as a fair trade for destroying the Lexington, and while Hitler himself sent his congratulations to the Japanese for their victory at Coral Sea, time would reveal that the battle had served as a strategic victory for the Allies, both in the preservation of Port Moresby's vital supply lines, as well as the loss of the Shokaku and the Zuikaku in the upcoming Battle of Midway, which deprived the Japanese of vital naval assets at the turning point battle to come. The Battle of Coral Sea also stands as the first naval battle in which neither side sighted the other's ships, while at the strategic level, the Battle of Coral Sea marks the end of the first phase of the Pacific War, which had seen nothing but victory after victory for the Japanese. As the second, more bloody phase of the Pacific War began, the Japanese now understood they were up against highly capable opponents who had successfully repelled their efforts to take Fort Moresby. Coral Sea was also the first carrier battle fought near the heretofore unknown island of Guadalcanal, although it would not be the last.